Yo, we back in it, bitch. We about to watch today the worst crimes committed on the dark web. Let's get into it.
Much has been made of the dark web. It's dangerous, it's illicit offerings, and it's
shout out Moon Crime. Shout out Moon Crime. Shout him out, bro. Big light. Let's get into it.
And today we're going to be scratching the surface of its depths to separate reality from fiction and give you a peek at the foundations on which this apparent haven for the depraved is built. Here are 3 of the darkest tales from the dark web. Though it's sad to say, poverty is a plague that will forever exist. Whether it be the current financial crisis, the effects of war, or any numbers of other factors, there will always be the haves and have-nots. There's little most of us can do in the grand scheme of things, and those who do have the wealth and influence to spark a sweeping change would never want to change the system that brings them fortune. It's admirable then that in the face of a titanic problem, that there are those who dedicate themselves to making whatever difference they can. We're talking about foreign volunteers, who trade the comforts of home for some of the planet's poorest regions in order to aid people in need. And a common destination for those who want to do their part is India, home to the largest population on Earth. It's also a country with extreme wealth inequality, where there's a stark divide between those who thrive and those who struggle just to survive. In the latter group, none are as vulnerable as the over 18 million kids who've been left to fend for themselves in the nation's streets. They're helpless and rely on the kindness of others, so while the impact of volunteer work might appear statistically small, it's enormous for the children who receive support. Those who would upend their lives for the sake of them are considered among the best of us, although at times the reality can be much darker. And this is Matthew Smith, a school teacher and philanthropist, whose motives were not as pure as they appeared. In 2007, at the age of 24, Smith uprooted from the UK and travelled to Chennai. On the surface, his reasons seemed virtuous. Between 2007 and 2014, he volunteered for non-profit organisations and worked in several orphanages in the country. For context, the vast majority of India's abandoned youth are without documentation, which makes them effectively invisible on anything but the smallest scale. As a result, they're easy targets for those with ill intentions, as there are few who'd ever know of the crimes committed against them, and even fewer who actually care. Little was known about Smith's interactions with the orphans he claimed to safeguard, though information that came to light much later made the exploitation of at least one child in his care an undeniable fact. The evidence showed him bathing naked and engaging inappropriately with a minor. After his 7 years in India, Smith then found a job teaching in Nepal. And as far as we're aware, there's no evidence that he committed crimes against the children he taught there. Whether this is because he managed to hide them or because he genuinely left the students alone, we will never really know. In either case, we'll soon see that Smith had an alternative way to satisfy his dark desires. He moved back to the UK in July 2022, and to true form, continued to ensure that he was always surrounded by children. In September that same year, Smith began working at Thomas's Battersea, a London private school that cost over £20,000 a year to attend. Perhaps his most famous student was Prince George, who's presently second in line to inherit the British throne. Smith had 2 roles at Thomas's Battersea. He was the deputy head teacher and, perhaps even worse, the head of pastoral care, the part of the school intended to ensure the physical and emotional well-being of students. There, he didn't draw a hint of suspicion, but behind the scenes, law enforcement was onto him, as they'd gotten word that he'd been sharing abuse materials on the dark web. Now, the dark web's infamy stems in no small part from its connection to
I ain't gonna lie, back in the day, like, I think it was like 13 or some shit, bro, I would go on Tor browser and just, like, search up random shit. I was probably older. Low-key, I think I was older. I don't know. But, bro, I seen, like, a lot of, bro, you would never seen, like, crazy shit. Because I guess it's kind of hard to find it, like videos of people getting tortured and shit. That's like that's like kind of hard to find, I think, because back then when I was looking at like dark web websites and stuff like that, bro, I would see like drugs and shit, like just like a lot of weird shit, like social IDs, passports, whatever. It's just like a whole lot of stuff like that. But I never seen not too crazy. I mean, I think I seen like a few parts of a certain thing. But yeah.
Predatory imagery, which is no surprise given its focus on privacy. The Tor browser affords tech-minded users an unmatched degree of anonymity, provided that they know what they're doing. And where there's anonymity, there will always be people like Matthew Smith ready to expose their darkest traits. Unfortunately for him, somewhere along the line, he'd slipped up. You see, dark web investigations are shrouded in secrecy, so typically you don't actually hear much about the process, because if you did, then criminals would know how to disguise their footprints. And this story was no exception. Investigators at the National Crime Agency gave no indication of what had tipped them off. Whatever they had on Smith, it was strong enough that they were cleared to arrest him in November 2022. When police raided his home in Chesterfield Grove, southeast London, the suspect was kind enough to leave the wealth of evidence in plain sight. You see, he'd left his black Dell laptop open, with dark web forums and sites dedicated to indecent imagery of children occupying several tabs. He'd also left the desktop version of Telegram logged in, and this would further expose his shameful secrets. You see, upon examination of the app, investigators found conversations chronicling 5 years of interactions between Smith and 2 teenagers back in India. He'd been engaged in conversation with one of them at the moment he was taken into custody, and it turned out that during and after his time in Nepal, Smith was paying these boys to act as his proxies. He'd make specific requests, send them illegal content as examples, and give them advice on how to build a child's trust. The teens would then target vulnerable children, recreate the examples they were shown, send in the results, and receive payment for their services. A detail often overlooked is that one of these teenagers seems to be former victims of Smith's, likely the child the police found evidence of him bathing with. As prosecutor Martin Hooper indicated during the legal process, quote, "When the boy was older, Smith, referred to his uncle, encouraged him to lure an 8-year-old boy away from his family with the express intention that he would be sexually abused. The defendant said he would pay their school fees in return." So over half a decade, the teacher had spent in excess of £65,000 commissioning abuse material. During the investigation, 120,000 indecent images of children were recovered from his electronic devices, around 11,000 of which were Category A. Those dark web tabs he'd left open also demonstrated that he wasn't alone, and there's a common requirement for entry into that breeder community: the contribution of original content. With that in mind, there's no telling how far the results of his offences may have spread. On the 9th of August 2023, Matthew Smith was then sentenced to 12 years in prison at Southwark Crown Court. He was added to the sex offenders register for life and is subject to an indefinite sexual harm prevention order. When asked if he'd commit any crimes against the students attending the London private school, Smith was adamant that he hadn't. When asked if he'd abused any children in other schools he worked at, he declined to answer.
Bro, we already know.
Anyone with a passing interest in the dark web has heard of the disturbing services available, provided you have the crypto to pay for them. From hiring a hacker to playing director in a murderer's red room, many believe you can buy almost anything, and different levels of truth exist within the whispers, making it challenging to discern the boundary between urban legends and reality. But a troubling substance that's long been associated with the dark web is murder for hire. But can you legitimately hire an assassin with a few mouse clicks? Well, a surprising number of people decide to find out for themselves. And this brings us to Deanna Mary Stinson, a Florida resident in her 50s. When we think of assassination, Stinson certainly isn't the image we have in our minds. She was an entrepreneur and a director of finance at a church in New Tampa. But as it turns out, envy is a very powerful thing, and Stinson's intentions turned dark in the summer of 2021, and the subject of her anger was none other than the wife of her ex-boyfriend. Precisely where this hatred came from, we have no real idea, but what we do know is that the married couple were regulars at Stinson's church, so she'd often see her target with her former boyfriend. She wanted them gone out of her life, and to do this, she went on tour, where she found it was shockingly easy to find someone offering to kill for a fee. So on June 24th, she created an account on a site, declaring itself the #1 hitman marketplace. It had a handy price list for potential customers. Death by beating would set them back a minimum of $2,000, a shooting at least $5,000, and employing a sniper would cost $20,000 plus. The rates must have seemed reasonable to Stinson, as the following day, she posted on the site's public forum requesting a quick hit in southern Florida. Now, when you're trying to purchase the services of a killer, there's a specific process that must be followed, so she gave the murder for hire agency her target's personal information and attached a picture of her to make identification simple. It's also crucial that a customer proves they have the Bitcoin for this. Only after this is transferred will a gang member be assigned to the job. Now, Stinson had a couple of additional stipulations for her gangster for hire. One, that the murder didn't take place when the victim was home, and that the target died in July, ideally between the 5th and the 11th. With her order in, she was eager to see the results. Her preferred date came and went, but the target was still breathing. There'd been a problem, but it was nothing another Bitcoin transaction can solve. Or perhaps it was, as there was another issue, then a third, and so on. Stinson would make 5 payments to the sites in pursuit of petty revenge, only to have been assigned a hitman with incredibly poor luck. Unhappy with the service she'd received thus far, Stinson demanded they have someone with a proven record carry out the hit. Having forked over $12,000 worth of crypto, she seemed no closer to having anyone killed, which, at minimum, warrants a passive-aggressive Yelp review. Fortunately, she would soon be contacted by someone capable of getting the job done. Unfortunately, this was an FBI agent, and his assignment was to arrest her. Once again, how this came to be was kept vague, with reports stating the FBI were alerted about Stinson, with no further details. In this instance, there were a couple of possibilities. Option 1 is that those running the site send word to law enforcement, which has happened on at least one occasion with a murder-for-hire site. But option 2 was that the site was actually being run by the feds.
That's what I
This
think.
is all too common to happen on the dark web, which usually follows from a silent seizure of domains involved in criminal activity. In either case, the investigators needed airtight evidence of Stinson's guilt.
Just saying, bro, it is not easy to find a website like that. And I'm not saying that like from experience or anything, but like, bro, think logically, bro. If it's easy to find, bro, then there's just like no way it's legit. And that's what she did, bro. I bet she found all those websites, the hitman websites, like really easy. And that's just like, bro, you're like dumb if you just do that, cause, bro, it's definitely fed, bro. So fed. If you find it easy, bro, it's not legit, bro.
So they acquired it in an interesting fashion. An agent posing as the assassin, sent to make good on the deal, texted Stinson to introduce himself. In a recorded phone call soon after, they discussed the details. The client reassured the fake hitman that she wanted the murder to go ahead. Naturally, this necessitated another payment, and the agent would require $350 to buy a revolver. Somehow, a professional killer, reported for duty, completely unarmed, didn't ring any alarm bells, so Stinson agreed. Initially, the agent asked for a Western Union bank transfer, but this wasn't her first rodeo. She knew that would be traceable, so instead she insisted the payment be made via crypto to ensure her security. When the agent agreed, she hopped over to her Coinbase wallet. Yes, the same Coinbase that requires passport-level ID to sign up for, and was arrested soon after. The arrest took place on September 22, 2021, and Stinson pleaded guilty to one murder-for-hire charge the following year on January 19th, and a few months later, she was sentenced. She's currently serving 6.5 years for her crime, and will be subject to 3 years of supervision post-release, and has been forced to shell out another $12,000 this time in restitution. And it could have all been avoided if, instead of seeking a hitman, she'd researched the dark web assassination business itself. If she'd done so, she'd have known the total number of confirmed hits by dark web assassins currently stands at 0.
Yeah, I bet
Thanks to
that's
dark
just
web
like
markets like Silk
impossible.
Road, Alphabet.
But like, bro, I bet people did assassinations over the dark web before, bro. I bet that shit happened already before. Or like on a Telegram or some shit. Because, man, anything's possible, bro.
And others,
Okay.
the criminal activity the dark web is especially famous for is the sale of illicit
But we
substances,
just can't
while the markets
fucking, we don't
themselves are
know
often
the
discussed.
road count because we can't fucking, there's not been a legit website.
The systems that
guess.
brought them up are rarely considered, and that's why in
That's
our
good
last
to know.
segment here, we're going to be covering exactly that. This is the story of Zent, the man who some call the Lord of the Dark Web. Born in 1959, Herman Johann Verwert-Duxen was an unusual kid. During his teen years, he developed an interest in historic buildings and was particularly fixated on a World War II Nazi bunker on the edge of his hometown of Arnhem in the Netherlands. He'd visited numerous times during his childhood, and the fascination with bunkers it sparked would never leave him. His other obsession was sci-fi, a genre he felt so connected with that he tried to make his bedroom resemble a futuristic spacecraft, going so far as to modify his bedroom door to open electronically. The name Zent was another result of his sci-fi addiction. Once he'd chosen the moniker, he insisted that everyone referred to him by that name, including his parents. In his early 20s, he made it official. Herman Johann Zent graduated from college in the early 80s, had 2 children with his partner, and created several computer-focused businesses in quick succession. If nothing else, he was ahead of the curve. Zent was convinced that computers were the future, and he felt that the freedom they'd grant would help shift governmental power back into the hands of the people. To him, few things mattered more than freedom and privacy. It was this, combined with a strange passion for bunkers, that led him to start his bulletproof web hosting business, Cyberbunker. The name wasn't simple branding. In 1995, he purchased a former NATO installation. It had been constructed in the 50s and designed to survive a 20 megaton nuclear blast. At 20,000 square feet spread over 5 underground floors, there was ample room to build an enterprise. He populated the space with servers and like-minded friends, several of whom were as strange as the man himself. During a period where how the internet should operate was still in flux, Zent wanted to lead the charge. At the time, there was minimal oversight, and that's exactly how the eccentric Dutchman believed it should be, though even he had some moral fibre it seemed, as Cyberbunker's rules prohibited terrorist content and explicit imagery of minors. Everything else was fair game. As you'd imagine, this meant that their servers were immediately flooded with adult entertainment. Some of the same energy made it into the bunker itself, which allegedly had a porno room, with live sex shows involving Zent's girlfriends. In spite of that, the staff found time to grow the business. In 1999, Herman's old friend, Sven Campius, joined the team, also known by his screen name CB3Rob. Campius was another bizarre character, though with anarchist leanings beyond those of his colleagues. Around the time of his arrival, Zent had opted to rent a part of the bunker to a third party. This arrangement persisted until July 27, 2002, when an explosion rocked the rental space. Zent suffered burns in the resulting fire, but what was discovered in the ashes would have longer lasting effects, the remnants of a drug lab. Supposedly unbeknownst to the cyberbunker crowd, the tenants had been producing ecstasy. There was plausible deniability, so no charges were leveled against Zent, but he was stripped of his business license. This meant that for a time, he had to move his operation above ground. Days later, Zent made a bold move. He and Campius declared the independence of their new state, the Republic of Cyberbunker. Their republic comprised of the partially destroyed bunker and its surrounding lands. Setting their apparent distaste for rulers aside, they decided it would be a monarchy. Zent became president and king of Cyberbunker, while Campius was dubbed His Royal Highness Prince Sven Olaf von Cyberbunker. Zent's kingship and Cyberbunker's independence seemed to have been tongue-in-cheek for him. His stated motive was a desire to work on projects without outside interference. Campius, on the other hand, was beyond willing to take advantage of his title. To this day, he still uses his diplomatic immunity as a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever possible. And over the years, Cyberbunker's clientele would shift further away from legitimate clients and towards criminality. Among its notable clients were WikiLeaks and a low-key file-sharing site known as the Pirate Bay. Its servers were frequently used in other illegal activities as well, including launching mass spam and phishing campaigns. Cyberbunker even facilitated one of history's worst cyber attacks, which was supposedly so impactful that it caused the entire internet to buckle. Legally, a host cannot be held responsible for what its users do, provided they aren't aware of any illegal activity. In effect, this could mean that everyone at Cyberbunker could simply play dumb and stay in the clear. Having grown tired of the scrutiny in the Netherlands, Zent pushed a second bunker in June 2013. Bunker 2 was situated near the town Treben-Trabach in Germany, and this time he doubled his security efforts by adding a perimeter fence and guard dogs to keep prying eyes at bay. It was in Bunker 2 that things would eventually crumble, though the process didn't begin there. Instead, the first domino fell a year later back in the Netherlands. There, the Dutch authorities were investigating an illegal marketplace called Cannabis Road. It was hosted on a Cyberbunker server, but one Zent claimed he had leased to another company. This turn of events led him to believe the German police were spying on him and passing information along. If this wasn't true at the time, it would be soon enough, and it would become a 5-year investigation by a German cybercrime unit in 2015. Though the servers claimed to be bulletproof, investigators had no trouble finding gaps in Cyberbunker's security. With the mains unit having been permitted to monitor Bunker 2's web traffic, they were surprised to see that between 10 and 15% of the data flowing through it was unencrypted. Among that data, they found connections to drug markets, the sale of credit card information, and a litany of scams. While the authorities were building a case against him, Zent was shifting gears. As the world had changed around him, bulletproof hosting had steadily become a less sustainable venture for Cyberbunker, in a large part because of the ludicrous decision to operate out of an old military installation. The majority of legitimate sites had moved to affordable mainstream hosts, so Cyberbunker's profits had fallen so far that they barely covered the cost of upkeep. While the man was trying something new, his focus was still on privacy. This time he aimed to secure phones. With the help of Campius and others, Zent developed encrypted apps, which operated on a private network. They were installed on modified handsets with disabled cameras and tracking, and often included a kill switch capable of wiping them clean. Within a year, this endeavor was turning a greater profit than the hosting businesses. Interestingly, most of his phone clientele were in Ireland, and there's a reason for that. On the left of this picture, we see Zent in all his glory. On the right is the Irish drug lord George Mitchell, also known as the Penguin, due to his strange gait. Mitchell's links to Zent go back at least as far as the purchase of Bunker 1. Allegedly, Mitchell had contributed $700,000 to cover some of the costs. The business relationship had continued over the decades, and Mitchell's network of dealers were a perfect market for what Zent was offering. Their ties were so close that the Penguin would act as a salesman, pushing phones to Colombian drug cartels. All things considered, the side hustle was going smoothly. But back in Germany, investigators had also shifted their focus too. They wanted to catch Zent committing explicit crimes, to prevent him hiding in a legal grey area. So the plan was simple. The mains unit would create their own scam site, one offering a Bitcoin lottery. They built something that looked intentionally sketchy, purchased Cyberbunker services, and contacted a representative asking for assistance. Even after making it clear they were engaging in fraud, the Cyberbunker rep had no qualms about helping. The collection of actionable evidence had begun, though what they'd have by the end of it would make this look like a drop in the ocean, as things would take a dramatic turn in 2018, when an intern working in Bunker 2 spotted something strange in a server room. Beneath the floorboards, there was an extra server tucked away, and thanks to a lack of care and a little naivety, Zent had left a critical flaw in his network that meant all you need to do to access everything on it was just access to a single connected device. Though the cybercrime unit declined to comment on it, it's clear what this discovery meant. They had someone on the inside, and there's no telling how long they'd been harvesting Cyberbunkers data in this way. But in any case, one more thing had to happen before the police could make their move, and it involved Cyberbunkers' most successful client, Wall Street Market. Wall Street Market was the world's second largest drug marketplace, having enabled over 36 million euros worth of sales during its lifetime. And as the case was being built against Cyberbunker, a parallel investigation into the WSM was ongoing. Since it was hosted on Cyberbunker servers, acting on the evidence against Zent too soon may have jeopardized the efforts of the other unit. The patience, however, would pay off in April of 2018, when 3 German nationals behind Wall Street Market were taken into custody. Before long, this would clear the way for the authorities focused on the bunker. The 26th of September 2019 was the day Zent's dark web empire crumbled. In a convenient turn of events, everyone who worked in Bunker 2 was outside of the complex. That day was a special occasion. Zent and his closest associates were at a local restaurant called the Historic Mill, celebrating the fact that their gardener had unexpectedly received some inheritance. Now, if this seems bizarre to you, it did to us too. The main floor of the restaurant was packed, in part due to the presence of multiple undercover officers. Zent had booked a private table out on the mezzanine, and had no idea the cops were coming until it was too late. As he and his associates were arrested, more than 100 police officers raided Bunker 2. There they recovered 412 hard drives, 433 servers, 65 USB drives, 61 computers, 57
so
phones,
much
with 100,000 euros in cash,
bro.
and reams of paper evidence. When all was said and done, they had an amount of data that wasn't possible to process. Strangely, Prince Camphius was never taken in, which led to speculation that he was the man on the inside. The authorities would downplay his involvement in the crimes that took place in Germany, and distance him from the operations of Cyberbunker in general. The flies in the face of first-hand accounts suggested that he was actually heavily involved, a point bolstered by the presence of a dark web search engine on Cyberbunker servers, cb3rob.net/darknet, that happened to share the programmer's username. The search engine indexed all manner of illegal content, including the kind Zent refused to permit. Zent himself believes that Gardner was the architect of his downfall. Allegedly, leaked documents do state that he was undercover law enforcement, though we can't vouch for their authenticity. Herman and his cohorts were sentenced on December 13th, 2021, having been convicted for aiding and abetting over 250,000 illicit transactions and being members of a criminal organization. In February of this year, George the Penguin Mitchell was formally declared a prime suspect in the investigation of Xclude, another encrypted phone network. Camphius remains free and is currently running Zent's network in his absence. Zent himself is currently serving 5 years and 9 months of prison time in Koblenz, Germany.
Wow. That's crazy, bro. I would have low-key thought I was seeing worse crimes committed on the dark web. I low-key would have thought I was seeing worse. I bet there is worse. This is like probably tip of the iceberg type shit. There is definitely worse. Because I definitely hear I heard a lot about like hitman stories, and I seen shit on like fucking YouTube, whatever, bro. And I would see that same shit like fucking blown off, like people trying to hire hitmen, they get fucking arrested. That's kind of like more common than other things that would happen on the dark web, you know. But I just could be just yapping that, but I could just be yapping. Hey guys, but I appreciate y'all for watching. I love y'all. God bless. This video is nice. Shout out to Moon Crime again. Love y'all, bro.